data science wasn't really a thing and analytics wasn't a thing. So while today there's
Wow.
lots of degrees, both in undergrad and masters, we didn't really
Right.
have that. We used to have an internal kind of LinkedIn system called white pages, and I
Mm-hmm.
would just find people that were in the position that I wanted to be in, and I would just email them
Wow.
internally, and I'd introduce myself and
Mm-hmm.
ask them for an opportunity to meet with them, to learn. Reach out to lots of
Wonderful.
people, find the people that you connect with, and those are the people you stay in touch with, because when an opportunity comes up, we live in a world
Mm.
today where it's even easier to learn than when I was learning, because we have chat
Mm.
GPT and all of these great generative AI tools. So there's
Right.
literally no barriers to learning right now. There's nothing to be worried about. Just reach out to other people, and eventually someone will respond, and try to take advantage of building those connections to create opportunity for yourself. Do you satisfy your
Mm.
commercial clients, or do you satisfy your customers? Now, Uber Eats gets money from both customers and from commercial. An example of a company that's done product really well. They've not only grown their user base, but they continue to be hyper growth even after 10 years of being on the market. In product analytics, we always strive to identify the problem. So where are people dropping off? Where are they not engaging? Identifying opportunity in your business is not something that AI can still do for you, but actually more data people should be focused on this.
Mm.
Don't be afraid to try things, because the only way to
Mm.
really learn and get better and to find good ideas is to try different things and see what works and what doesn't work.
Today we have Delina with us. Delina is the Senior Director of Data Science and Product Analytics at Misplay, where she drives machine learning system, product insights, and analytics engineering. With a diverse background spanning industries like tech and food, Delina has a track of leveraging data to optimize user engagement, improve supply chain efficiency, and deliver scalable business solution. Delina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So this is again, I'll reiterate, like, no, this is all about your journey. I mean, we'll try to pick up insights, right? Uncover your entire journey and how did you do what you're doing right now.
Yeah,
So let's get started. I mean, I'm excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. So tell us about your early days, right? As we discussed earlier, no, I mean, you are from Western University, right? So how was your time as a student, and how did you move into your first job, and
Mhm.
anything like that LinkedIn doesn't tell us about your early days? I mean, we'd love to hear that as well.
Sure. Well, I went to Western University, and I studied business at the time.
Mhm.
Data science wasn't really a thing and analytics wasn't a thing. So while today there's
Wow.
lots of degrees, both in undergrad and masters, we didn't really
Right.
have that. So you could do a economics degree or a stats degree, but at the time business was really popular for many people, and so I wanted to work in business, and this is the path I chose. And so while in school, I took, all the common kind of stats, econ courses, finance courses. Those are sort of the
Hmm.
technical realm of courses that I took. And then when I graduated and started looking for work, I figured that the most logical kind of quantitative step for me was to go into finance. And
Right.
so I didn't have a job lined up out of school. I was working
Hmm.
at the bank, however. I was working in the call center, and I was doing this while I was in school, but I used it as an
Okay.
opportunity to start networking internally. So I started reaching
Wow.
out just randomly. We used to have an internal kind of LinkedIn, system called white pages, and I
Hmm.
would just find people that were in the position that I wanted to be in, and I would just email them
Wow.
internally, and I'd introduce myself and
Hmm.
ask them for an opportunity to meet with them, to learn. And two things I always asked was, if I reached out to someone who was in a role that I wanted to
Hmm.
be in, I would ask them, how did you get there? So what were the things you did?
Wow.
What was a
Mm.
portfolio that you built? How did you demonstrate the skills so that I could replicate that process? And then when I
Mm.
reached out to hiring managers, I would ask them, what are you looking for? Even if they didn't have a job posted. So I would just reach out to people all the
Mhm.
time, and is it something that you're looking for when you're looking to hire talent? What are the key skills? How do you weed people
Okay.
out? How can I position myself to be a strong candidate once you have a job open?
Mm.
And so I
Wow.
did that for a few months. And then eventually, one of the people that I had networked with called me and said, I have a 4-month contract opening on my team. Are you
Okay.
interested? And so I said, yes. It was a tricky decision at the time, though, because I had a full time permanent job at the call
Mm.
center, And if I had taken this 4-month contract, I would have to give up my permanent position, meaning that hopefully the 4-month contract results in a full time role, or I would have nothing
Right.
to come back to. But I took the
Mm.
risks. I said, look, I'm not going to get this experience again because I didn't do any internships during school. So I didn't have any hands on experience. So I said, I'm going to take the
Right.
risk. And I moved to Toronto, took the 4-month contract. And then
Mm-hmm.
I did a good job. Like I tried my best and, obviously worked really hard and many hours of kind
Mm-hmm.
of proving myself. And then I was lucky and that turned into a full-time opportunity. And then the rest is kind of history. So that
Wow.
was kind
Okay.
of my first job. And then after that,
Right.
continued to do this process. So while I was at the bank, I again networked internally a lot and met with lots of
Mm-hmm.
people. And TD had a really big culture of internal networking and promotions and movement. So this was really
Wow.
encouraged for you to always be networking and always be meeting people and always be thinking about your next step. So I would say that I
Wow.
learned this skill while I was there. And then I, again, kind of, always did my best to let my work speak for itself. So in addition to networking, make sure that I'm always doing a good job. And then that kind of led to my second role and my third role in the corporate realm. And that was until about 2016. And then I went into
Wow.
consulting. So that was kind of the beginning
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah. Great. So this is to all our viewers. I mean, I didn't tell them that Delina was also my professor while I was in school. She was straight for 2 terms, and I learned a lot from her as well. I mean, she's very hardworking, as you know, literally said that you reached out to people, right? You network at a level where people came back and recommended you that no, hey, there's a opening in my team. Would you like to reach out? So again, reaching out to people is definitely a key, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people network when they need something, right?
Yeah.
When they are desperate in looking something, whereas
Mhm.
in your case you were continuously reaching out to people, and I think
Yeah.
that was the key. I mean, worked on your profile parallelly, right? And when the right opportunity knocked in, I mean, you were the right fit. So wonderful. Great,
Yeah,
great.
and I would
So
say one kind of piece of advice I have there is you're
yes,
going to
please.
reach out to lots of people, right? And not everyone's going to respond, and you're not going to
Right.
click with everybody. But probably out
Right.
of, let's say, 100 people that I reached out to, 20 of
Hmm.
them responded and I had meetings with, and 3 of them I connected with and built a
Wow.
relationship with. So reach out to lots of
Wonderful.
people, find the people that you connect with, and those are the people you stay in touch with, because when an
Right.
opportunity comes up, whether it's on their team or somebody else's team, they're the ones that are going to be sponsors for you and help you move along.
Right.
And those 3 people I still talk to today. So, it's been,
Wow.
14 years now, but I still keep in touch with them. And that, I'm always grateful for the opportunities that they gave. But yeah, like not just networking, but make sure you're building connections with a few people and staying in touch with them through the years.
I'm just trying to pull out all the learning from your
Mhm.
journey. Like a lot of people I see, they connect to let's say 2 to 3 people, and then when they do not get the response back, they're like discouraged. Okay, should I reach to 4 people? I mean, should I do it? In your case, I saw the number like no, out of 20 people, 3 responded positively, and then you were able to connect to those 3 people really, really
Mhm.
well. So I mean, this is again learning for all of us that no, do not get discouraged. I mean, at least reach out to those 10, 20, 15 people, because they are, I mean, you don't know. You have to, there's a saying, right? To get a gold, you have to dig the mud, right? So
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, like you out of 20 people, there will be 3 people who will be responding positively to you. So
And all
wonderful.
you
Thank
need
you
is
so
one
much
yes.
for yes, absolutely. Okay, just to trying to understand your journey again, like no, you started as a financial analyst in
Mhm.
TD, right? And then after your consulting stint, then you came back to TD again, right? And now this
Yeah.
time it was more of a like analytics role into more into data science. Now tell us, how did that happen? I mean, like from a finance role, how did you move to like mainframe of data science?
Yeah. Well, so when I was at TD, my first few years there, we'd had business intelligence teams and we
Mm-hmm.
had quantitative roles like financial modelers, for example. But
Mm-hmm.
data science and analytics wasn't a broad focus of the bank. So we didn't have, a
Mm-hmm.
chief data officer. These weren't things that were happening.
Okay.
Around the time when I left in 2016, early 2016, we were just
Mm-hmm.
starting to scratch the surface of being data
Got it.
driven. So we had just
Mm-hmm.
hired our first CDO. We just started kind of building a department. There was 2 people in the department, so it was very, very
Right.
small. Not a lot of focus in the bank. Now, when I left and I went to consulting, I would say I took a few really key skills out of being in
Mm-hmm.
consulting. And one was problem
Okay.
solving. So being able to
Okay.
kind of go into any industry, figure out what is the problem that we're solving for here, and how do we facilitate the process from problem definition through solution
Mm-hmm.
implementation to fix whatever is wrong.
Got it.
Second key skill after problem solving is kind of creativity in thinking and strategic thinking. So being able to
Mm-hmm.
understand how do companies work, what do they need, and how does the different departments in a company fit together to deliver on those goals. So kind of connecting the macro level goals of a company to the micro level execution of different departments. So those were two key things that I took away. But then when I
Got
went
it.
back to TD, first my first formal data role was really in the strategy space, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
I got that role, because I had built these key skills in my consulting days. And
Got
so
it.
my focus was really around building that data strategy for the bank. So how do we build data governance capabilities, data organization capabilities, policies, standards? How do we bring this huge company on board to this data mission that we have? And I also
Mm-hmm.
focused a lot on data usage strategy. So we have a lot of data. What are the things that
Mm-hmm.
we can and can't do with it, or should and shouldn't do with it? So how do we answer some of these ethical questions? And then from there, I moved into analytics strategy. So after doing
Okay.
kind of data governance strategy, I moved into analytics strategy. And then this was more
Mm-hmm.
focused on specifically two things. One was talent that I focused on. So how do we build up the skills of the 2,000 data people that we have across the bank? How do we bring them from people that operate primarily in SQL to more modern tools? At the time, we were looking at Hadoop, Python, all of these things.
Okay.
Much has
Right.
changed since then, even though it's only been
Mm-hmm.
6 years. But this was kind of the focus on talent strategy. And then secondly, it was around machine learning, data science use case identification. So how do we identify opportunities for us to use data throughout the bank, and how do we build the right teams and the right workflows to enable actually bringing value with data? So those were my focuses there,
Got it.
and again, moving with that strategic and problem solving skill set into those sort of focused roles at the bank.
Got it. Got it. So there's just one follow-up question on this. You had the experience from consulting company, right? Your consulting job previously, after you moved to like TD. So here, I mean, you moved into mainframe of data science. So how was the journey of learning those skills, like skills of like Python, then Hadoop, then
Mhm.
SQL? How was the journey of learning those skills while you were working?
Well, I would say that so a lot of it was new to me, right? I would say that I'm probably not the best person to be in a classroom. So classroom learning is not for me, which is a little bit hypocritical, because now I obviously teach in
Okay.
a classroom. But I'm a really hands-on person, and
Hmm.
I need a lot of opportunity to practice hands-on skills. And so, back when I
Got it.
first started working, Excel was kind of the thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
came out of school thinking I knew Excel, and then I got into my first finance job and realized I knew nothing of Excel. But very quickly, once I started practicing, I learned, not only did I learn it very quickly, but it became sort of meditative to, have, no meetings in a day and just put music on and work on Excel sheets. Like, this was really fun for me. So I've always enjoyed these technical type of roles and languages and functions and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it was about finding time and opportunity to do that in a hands-on way. So at work, even
Got
though
it.
I wasn't yet in a formal analytics role, I took every opportunity I
Mm-hmm.
could to practice SQL, to practice Python, and
Got
just
it.
made up work for myself. And I think that's another kind of tip that I have is, these tools are open source. Python's an open source tool. It's not
Right.
something that you need to purchase or you need to convince your company to purchase. And everybody, no matter
Hmm.
what your role you're in, you are working with some sort of data. So you're not
Hmm.
everybody works with files. So
Right.
if you're working with any
Right.
type of file, that is some sort of data. And so you can find opportunities for yourself. So whether it's automating a
Hmm.
report, whether it's automating a process for yourself, whether it's
Hmm.
automating a summary of what you did for the week, whether it's building a small application to help you in your day-to-day
Right.
activities. You don't need to have a client to produce these things for, but finding these
Hmm.
opportunities to do this by yourself is what helps you build the skill. So that's what I did. Like, I tried to
Hmm.
find as many opportunities as I could to build tools for myself, and that's how I got the hands-on practice. And then eventually it becomes a second nature, and quicker than you would think. Like, you pick it up pretty quickly once you start using it every day.
Right. Right. Uh, rather than I summarizing it, I would ask you straight away, like, no, do you have any, and I ask these questions towards the end of the conversation, but I'll jump in right away here. Do you have any
Sure.
suggestions for people, those who are currently working in the bank and wants to move to that data science role? Do you have any suggestions for them, and what should be the first step in the process?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two core elements. Number one, you need to have the technical skill. So, we live in a world
Hmm.
today where it's even easier to learn than when I was learning because we have Chat
Hmm.
GPT and all of these great generative AI tools. So, there's
Right.
literally no barriers to learning right now. And
Hmm.
these tools can adapt it to teach you in a way that you understand. So, there's not even
Right.
barriers in terms of different learning styles. So, number one, anybody who's interested absolutely has to build the technical skills. That's still
Hmm.
a core expectation because it's not that you
Right.
can't use generative AI to help you, but
Hmm.
it's just that you need to know what you're doing in order to use it effectively. So, step number one, build the core skills, build the hard
Hmm.
skills as much as you can. Make time for it, right, in your day. So, again, these are some ideas I shared of like when you're working in your current job, whatever that is, whatever you can automate, whatever you can make it easier for yourself using some of these tools, just practice and do it so that you can learn the technical skills. And then second is about, before you can get into a job, often hiring managers are looking for demonstrated experience that you can do the job
Right.
before you come in. Now, this is a tough one because how am I supposed to get any experience if you don't give me the
Right.
job, right?
Right.
But this has always been true. So this phenomenon of needing to have experience before you get the
Hmm.
job has been true even
Right.
when I was starting out. So this isn't a new thing. But I do believe there are many ways that you can demonstrate the skills without having the job. So again, every single job that you have, there's going to be an analytical element to that job.
Hmm.
There's going to be an
Right.
element of critical thinking and problem solving. And there's going
Got
to
it.
be data that you work with in that job, whatever that is. So,
Hmm.
again, I would challenge people the way you build a portfolio, take your current role, see where you have decisions that you need to make, see what data you have to
Right.
support the decisions, and try
Hmm.
to conduct an analysis or try to demonstrate how you would conduct an analysis to go from data to insight to decision. And that's how you start to build your portfolio and how you start to
Got
quantify your experience. So then when you apply for
it.
jobs, you're able in your resume to highlight the impact that you've had, right? So reducing
Right.
cost, increasing revenue, improving efficiency, whatever the impact is at your level and in your role,
Mhm.
and how you've done that using the technical tools that would be needed for that particular role. So those are the two things that I advise to people. And then third, of course, is networking. So you need someone to give you a chance. You
Right.
need someone to give you a chance at an interview. So again, just reaching out, networking. Don't be shy. Not everyone's going to respond. Doesn't matter if they don't respond, they're not thinking about you anymore. Like you don't need to worry about
Right.
about that, right? So there's nothing to be worried about. Just reach out to other people and eventually someone will respond, and try to take advantage of building those connections to create opportunity for yourself.
Very pinpointed, very no clean answer, right? And very actionable insight as well. So, no, I'll just digress a bit from your journey, right? And this questions can be broad, right? So now what I'm seeing here is like banking has like a lot of traditional way of operating, right? Banks
Mhm.
have like from years they have been operating in a very traditional way, right? And now they are adapting to that analytics, right, to the machine learning. And now we have AI is like kind of disrupting a lot of industries, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I want to understand, because you have very I mean, good experience in basically working in banks, right? So tell us one thing. How do you see that banks implementing AI in their broader applications, like the fraud detections? Because we've been keep getting
Mhm.
calls, right? If we make some certain transactions, they call us. Oh, was it you? So I
Yeah.
mean, tell us like if you see that no, they applying AI into their broader applications like risk or like the customer services. Do you see that happening in any time soon?
Well, a lot of banks are already using AI in a lot of these applications. So fraud
Okay.
detection is largely driven by AI machine
Hmm.
learning. And that's why the
Right.
banks can respond so quickly whenever you do see a fraudulent transaction because they
Got
have
it.
these models that are able to identify these transactions so quickly that they're able to call you
Right.
and tell you and or block it, right? And prevent the fraud from happening. So
Hmm.
AI has been in banks for a very long time. So it's not,
Okay.
shiny potentially like like
Okay.
generative AI, but it's been in banks for a
Mm-hmm.
very long time. A lot
Mm.
of banks have assistants today. So, TD, RBC, they have assistants that you can talk to, which are chatbots. They're AI driven, which again are trying to solve that same problem of servicing
Got it.
customers. RBC has an assistant called Nomi, and that can give you insights about your spending habits and where there's opportunity and what's upcoming. So these are all
Mm.
examples where AI has been implemented into the user
Got
journey
it.
and into some of the risk operations of the bank. Um,
Mm.
there's definitely opportunity for more solutions, however. And,
Right.
both RBC and TD own AI companies. So TD owns Layer 6, excuse
Mm.
me. RBC owns Borealis, and these are AI research companies which
Got it.
solve banking problems. So the whole point of them is to build, more sophisticated solutions to be used in the bank. So I would say
Mm.
that today there's heavy investment, but there is
Got
some things that are going to block the banks on being able to be completely AI driven, or why it's going to be a bit slower than potentially some
it. Mm-hmm.
startups. And that's number
Mm-hmm.
one. There's a lot of regulation. So in Canada, banks are very heavily
Right.
regulated, and so
Mm.
you can't just deploy models. Like deploying, such a big change to a fundamental
Mm.
part of the operation or customer experience takes years typically in the bank, because there's lots of
Right.
regulation. We need to make sure there's no bias. We need to make sure that, or not the wrong kind of bias. We need to make sure that the models are as risk proof as they can be, so that they don't make any mistakes, because there's
Mm.
a lot can go wrong. And so that's number one blocker in moving quickly. Two,
Right.
technology is a really difficult thing to change at the banks, because most of
Mm.
these banks in Canada, they operate on legacy systems. COBOL. I don't know if you know anybody that writes COBOL, but at least when I was there was like one person in the whole company that knew how to write COBOL,
Okay.
which is the programming language used for the entire banking
Mm.
system. So the banking system that was built when the bank first opened, in back in the 60s, I think 50s, 60s. So very,
Okay.
very old systems that need to be replaced, but that's really difficult to do when you're dealing with an 80,000 person company, and again, lots of
Mm.
legacy software. A lot of the software issues and hardware issues happen because of acquisition. So when companies acquire each other, they're acquiring also
Right.
some of that software, and integrating acquisition software, if it's not done at the beginning, it might never be done. And so you have a lot of just a lot of overhead, a lot of tooling
Mm.
that is really useful.
Right.
So that's another big blocker on deploying some of these models quickly and at the scale that is needed. So again, I think the banks have done a great job of implementing a lot of AI tools already, whether we really see them externally or not. They've done a great job, but regulation and technology, these are some of the biggest blockers. And thirdly, talent, like having the
Got it.
right teams, being able to move quickly. These are kind of the big
Mm.
blockers, why they won't be able
Right.
to move as quickly. But I suspect that will start to change as pressure mounts from fintechs and other types of companies coming about. They've got to
Right.
stay competitive somehow.
Awesome. I mean, you've answered a lot of my follow-up questions as well. So I think regarding the regulations, regarding the fintech. So again, thank you for that. Uh, Now coming down to your journey at Misplay, right? So I saw
Mhm.
that you are using like machine learning to build this loyalty program, because currently even I'm working on building similar products. So I want to understand from your perspective first, if you can tell us like what Misplay is doing for our audiences as well.
Yeah, sure. So Misplay is a mobile gaming loyalty platform. So we
Mm-hmm.
partner with game developers to help them acquire new users.
Mm-hmm.
We have a recommendation system that recommends mobile games to users, and hopefully gets the kind of like Netflix recommends movies. So hopefully introduces players to mobile games. And then once
Mm-hmm.
the players are in the game, we have a loyalty program to help them progress through the game and to stay loyal to certain developers' games. So if they like something, we give them units when they spend time or money in the game, and then they can redeem the units for gift cards. So they get something out of it as well.
Hmm. And I saw that you're using this machine learning to like boost this loyalty program, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, if you can help us understanding if someone is like trying to build it from ground zero, right? What was the approach, especially in terms of business, and like what was the early challenges? If you can just
Mhm.
give us a framework.
I can't tell you the trade secrets, unfortunately, but I mean, I can speak more broadly about business, right? So,
Yeah, please. Yeah.
when you're trying to build a business from ground up, first of all, there has to be product market fit. So you've got to. It doesn't necessarily
Mm,
mean that you have to have a unique product that doesn't exist on the market, but you need to have a product that is relevant today. If you're trying to build something that there isn't really a market for, you're going to have a really hard time getting
mm,
interest in it, both from the users, especially if you're dealing with kind of a two-sided marketplace like we are. So we have both
mhm,
game developers and we have users. You're kind of trying to convince two parties that your product is useful for them for different purposes. So that's challenge number one. Similar
mm,
to Uber, right? So Uber Eats, all of these companies, DoorDash, like these are examples of two-sided marketplaces where Uber
mm.
Eats, for example, has to service restaurant clients and individual customers. The way to think about
Got
it
it.
is this, and why you have a natural conflict is that restaurants and Uber Eats, for example, they want to be shown first to the user. So if I'm going to be paying money to Uber Eats, I need
Mm,
Uber Eats to be giving me sufficient revenue or enough revenue or more revenue than what it's costing me to be on there in order for me to
right.
continue advertising with them. So I want to make sure that my restaurant is
Mm,
displayed at the beginning for the customers that would potentially order from me. However, you can't just show customers a single restaurant. Customers, on the other hand, want variety. So you need to show them
right.
many restaurants that would appeal to them. So
Mm,
you have these restaurants that you're trying to make sure they're shown to the right customers so that you're driving traffic for them. But for the customers,
mhm.
you want to give them variety of restaurants so that they have variety of choice. So you see how there's a natural
Got
conflict
it.
between two objectives. Do you satisfy your
Mm,
commercial clients or do you satisfy your customers? Now, Uber Eats gets money from both customers and from commercial clients or restaurants.
right.
So
Mm,
restaurants pay them a fee for using them as a service to deliver, and the customer pays a service fee. So they do make money from both sides.
mm,
But which one do they make more money from, and which one should they kind of try to appeal to more? That's a really big challenge in these types of businesses,
mm,
and there's often not a best answer. You can't maximize both things. You need to find the right balance where both sides are equally happy, because you don't have a business if you don't have one of the sides. If you don't have restaurants, you're not
got
going to
it.
have customers, and if you don't have customers, you're not going to have restaurants. So
Mm,
I would say with Misplay, we have a similar, challenge of how do we satisfy kind of both sides. So how do we help
mm,
game developers acquire new users, and how do we move
got it.
people game to game? But at the same time, how do we create a user experience where we're
Mm,
promoting, play depth, right? And we're helping players enjoy the time that they're spending in a particular game. Now, where
got it.
machine learning and AI can help. So again, from a business strategy perspective, product market fit, make sure you have a
Mm,
product that fits the market. Two, if you're dealing with a two-sided marketplace, understand what are these kind of natural conflicts that you're facing.
got it.
And then from there you can kind of figure out how do we build systems that help us satisfy the needs across the board, right? So machine learning and
Mm,
AI is really useful. There's lots of applications. I mean, something like Uber Eats, for example, might use AI to find the best recommendations of restaurants for a user
right.
based on that person's preferences. Netflix, for example, again, another example of kind of a two-sided marketplace, although the monetization model is a bit different because they pay for rights to
Mm,
movies and their primary income is from subscriptions. But again,
got
they're
it.
trying to make sure that if they're paying for a movie to be on their platform, there's enough people
Mm,
watching the movie to make it worth that
right.
spend. And so you can use AI systems like recommendation engines, for example.
Mm,
And then in terms of loyalty, there's we give a lot of incentives at Misplay. So what we and other companies do as well. So Uber Eats will often give you discounts, for example, on certain
right.
restaurants if you buy at a certain time, or they'll give you offers if you haven't come back in some time. So you
Right.
can use AI with these applications. So the AI might
Mm,
answer questions like, how much discount should we give to customer A versus customer B? Maybe for customer
got
A, if they haven't bought something for 5 weeks, you need to offer them a
it. Mm,
50% discount for them to come back. But person B might only
got
need
it.
20% discount. So why would you give
Mm,
50 when they'll take 20, right? And so these are the types of questions and how you can use some of these models to optimize business performance and to drive value to the business. Again, difficult to maximize all objectives, but you can find some middle ground that will satisfy them in a sufficient way.
got it. So, uh, just one more question, okay, on this part. So, I know you're also working on the product side, right? Product analytics side. So I want to
Mhm.
understand, how do you identify that your users need new features in the app,
Mhm.
or on your platform?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a few ways, like in terms of features. So, one, product people, so people that have a product management background, typically they'll have, with more experience, they'll have expertise to say without necessarily looking at data. They may know some things that are going to work already. So,
Hmm.
for example, Duolingo is a great example. I think Duolingo is an example of a company that's done product really well. They've not only grown their user base, but they continue to be hyper growth even after 10 years of being on the market. So, there's a few things they do that are really obvious for any app. So,
Hmm.
anyone that has an app or an app based experience, there's a few kind of
Hmm.
features that are going to be really obvious. So, things like creating competition, anything that gamifies the experience. So, experience points, leaderboards, for example, competitions with friends. So any features that are of that type of nature are always kind of going to be good for the app and probably going to be useful to create engagement and to create
Hmm.
stickiness of users. Live ops, so making sure the right notifications are being sent out, notification content, and so on. So there's going to be elements of features that from experience, anyone that's worked
Hmm.
in the app space, what works and how do we bring these things and what's kind of table stakes experience that we should have. Then there's going to be things that we don't exactly know the answer to. But I would say that from a product development process, the
Hmm.
role of product development and product analytics isn't to say a new feature is needed. The role is to
Okay.
say what is a problem that users are facing. Then we can
Hmm.
brainstorm what a solution looks like. But the role of
Got it.
product analytics is to identify the problem. So a problem
Hmm.
might look like people dropping off, for example. So you might do some analysis on how people navigate through the app, and you might say, well, we noticed that people spend about 30 seconds on the homepage and then they're dropping off, and maybe it's
Got
20%
it.
of users are doing that. So what that
Hmm.
tells me is that maybe they're not finding something on the homepage that they're looking for. So we can do more
Right.
analysis and look a bit deeper on what that looks like. So you can, and then maybe
Hmm.
you find something like, well, they seem to be scrolling and they see the first two rows of games. I'll use Misplay as an example. Maybe they see the first two rows of games. They don't seem to be scrolling to the right to see what else is kind of available. So maybe they
Got it.
don't know that the games scroll
Hmm.
to the right. So this may not
Right.
need a new feature. So you may not need a new explanation, but maybe what you do is you make
Hmm.
game tiles a little bit smaller so they can see a small
Hmm.
preview of the next game tile so that it hints to them that there's more and that they can scroll right as well as up
Got
and
it.
down. So that's an example of how you might identify a problem. But I would say
Hmm.
this is typically the product development process. So in product analytics, we always strive to identify the problem. So where are people dropping off? Where are they not engaging? Are they not taking advantage of a particular feature? And then
Hmm.
once we know that there's a problem area, then we'll typically partner with product teams to brainstorm like why might that be. So product teams, engineering teams, why might people be facing this problem? In many cases, you might do user research. So you may have a focus group to get feedback directly from the users to understand the experience and how they're responding to the experience. And only then do we decide, okay, do we need a new feature? Do we need to adjust an existing feature? Or is this just a matter of, communicating better, for example? So that would be kind of the product development process we follow.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a bit general questions on the data science. Now, I see that a lot of work on, especially on data science, is being automated by like machine learning platforms, like
Mhm.
no code platforms. Tell us, where do you see this role of data scientist uh, in 5 years down the line? So how do people should navigate around to basically stay relevant, right?
Mhm.
All Even if a lot of work is automated,
Yeah.
especially on the technical side.
Yeah, it's a good question, and again, not something that is necessarily new. So, again, when
Mhm.
I recall back to when I started working, but I remember that when I started working, I used to automate a lot of Excel reports, and this used to save me a
Hmm.
lot of time. And I remember that
Okay.
the couple of people I worked with, my two colleagues and I, we automated a lot of things, and we were probably the
Hmm.
only ones that automated things in entire
Okay.
department. And so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people had the same concern then. Like, if we automate a lot of these reports, well, what am I going to do with my free time? And, do I still have a
Right.
job? And so there's these concerns are not new. And I think that even despite having the auto ML, so some of these features in Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Azure that offer them,
Right.
even with ChatGPT, you can automate a lot. So there's tons of these
Mm.
automated analytics tools coming out, and all of that.
Right.
Um, so I don't see these as a deterrent to the field or an elimination of the field. I see it as a bit
Mm-hmm.
a challenge of how do we add more value? Because to me, if
Got it.
your role is to write code or write SQL and prepare reports, this takes
Mm-hmm.
a lot of your time. And so you actually have less time to think critically about
Mm.
strategy or the problems that we're solving
Right.
for. And so, for
I
example,
agree.
with data scientists and with auto ML tools, even now with ChatGPT, even if you don't have an auto ML tool, you can pretty quickly ask ChatGPT to build you the code required for a particular model, and
Right.
not that it was even hard before, because libraries like scikit-learn,
Mm.
you've been in my class, like, we're looking at 3 lines of
Right.
code to deploy a model. So the
Right.
hard part of deploying models is not writing code, but fine, we can
Mm.
automate a lot of that, which a lot of these tools will do. Even analysis is not part of deploying models, is not writing code, but fine, we
Do them. Right. Right.
what these tools don't solve for is identifying opportunity, identifying problems, and figuring
Right.
out what's needed to solve the problem. So,
Mm.
identifying opportunity in your business is not something that AI can still do for you, but actually, more data people should be focused on this.
Mm.
So, as a data scientist, if you've so far, if your strength so far has been code writing and model building, like writing code and using some of these libraries, that's great, but you need to start working on, how can I now start to solve problems? How do I identify opportunities? How do I identify problems? So what this means
Mm.
is, for example, let's take a look at the revenue generation, for example. Taking a look at a business, and I'll give you one example. I talked to somebody at, I think it was DoorDash. And so I was asking some questions, because DoorDash is a two-sided marketplace today. And from what I understood, there isn't really a sophisticated system today of how,
Mm-hmm.
how performance is measured, both for the commercial clients, which are the restaurants, and then for the user. So they sort of have a matching
Got it.
system, and that's how the app works. It's meant to be a matching system. They look at user ratings. It's really not that complicated. But
Mm.
identifying opportunity might be like saying something like, if we're able to deliver a certain return on a restaurant, maybe we're able to charge more for that. So why don't we create a tiered
Right.
charging system, let's say, where we say,
Mm.
for the first 100 customers, you pay us, 3% of each order. But if we get from customer 101 to 200, you pay us 3.5% for each order, because we've now added incremental value to you. Now,
Mm.
incrementality is really difficult to measure, because how do you know
Right.
what is incremental versus what's a natural behavior? And so, if
Right.
I had a data science team, I'd want them to be thinking about that. Let's say we run with this idea. No, I'm not saying this is a good idea, by the way. I just made it up on the spot. But let's say
Mm-hmm.
this is a good idea. One, you'd want a data science team to focus on, how do we measure incrementality? So now, instead of writing
Right.
code, I want you to be thinking about that. So you need to be thinking
Mm.
about experiments. How do we quantify what incrementality means?
Right.
How do we know that 3.5% is the right rate versus 3%?
Mm.
What is the right rate? Is that going to chase some commercial clients away? Are they not going to want to partner with us
Mm.
because of increase? How do we justify this increase in rate with the added value? So how do we actually quantify that added value that we're sending them in terms of orders, for example? So these are things that you want the data science team to be thinking about, because they're not easily answered with code. This is a lot more focused on problem solving, problem identification. How do we implement something like this without losing commercial clients? If we lose a couple of clients at the beginning, is it worth it? Are we going to get more clients longer term by having this sort of
Mm-hmm.
approach? So these are more strategic questions, and data people are much better positioned than other people in their other roles in the company, because they have access to data and they're comfortable working with data. So they're much
Got it.
better positioned to answer some of these questions. So I guess all that to kind of summarize is, technical skills are great, easy to
Mm-hmm.
automate, right? Have been
Right.
easy to automate for a long time. So this is not new, but focus a lot more on strategy, identifying opportunity, identifying problems, being able to quantify an opportunity, and kind of taking that process of, how do we start with opportunity identification through to implementing some sort of solution or some sort of idea to maximize or capitalize on that opportunity.
Wow. Great. Thank you so much. You've answered a lot of questions. I mean, like I had few follow up questions as well, but as your answer progressed, I mean, you answered already a lot of my follow up question as well. Great. Thank you so much for that. I mean, one last question.
Mhm.
One unfiltered advice that you received from your mentor that is helping you throughout.
Yeah, good question. I think one, so networking we already talked about. I think that's
Mm-hmm,
kind of been the common advice that I've always received as well.
mm-hmm,
Two, second piece of advice is, don't be afraid of failure. Like I think a lot of people are
mm,
afraid to do something wrong or make a mistake, and I do notice now working with teams that um, there's people that come, especially coming out of school, because school has such a focus on like not making mistakes and getting good grades and
right,
things like that. So it's
right.
like people come out and they're kind of afraid of failing or afraid of making a mistake. But I don't think
Mm-hmm,
this is a bad thing at all, because if you make a mistake, you're discovering something that doesn't work. And a lot of people
right.
don't take any risks at work because they're afraid of making a mistake. So
Mm,
second piece of advice is, everybody should have some leniency at work. I mean, everyone has to check within their own team. There's certainly roles where you can't make mistakes. So take this with a grain of salt. But
right.
where you have a more open role or you have more opportunity to do things yourself or a little bit more autonomy, don't be afraid to try things, because the only way to
Mm,
really learn and get better and to find good ideas is to try different things and see what works and what doesn't work, and then kind of iterating from there. So I'm always an advocate of the kind of iterative approach and not being afraid of a failure, and just being curious. I think one thing that I kind of notice now is when I talk to people, especially on getting ahead and these questions, like you've said too, how do I build the skills? How do I learn?
right,
You have to be curious, right? So, you
right,
learn some things in school, like even when you and I were in class together, right? There's some things that in the limited amount of time that we have per week, I'm going to be able to teach a
right,
class. But people
right,
have to be able to take what they learn and kind of take it further ahead by
right.
themselves, right? So if I teach you a concept, let's say a particular model and how that model works, don't just stop there. Like take the model.
Right.
Now, again, you have access to tools. Ask ChatGPT more detail. How does it work? How does it make decisions? Can you
Mm,
give me an example? Walk me through the math, right? So you have these tools at your hands. So I think that's the third piece of advice is be curious, continue to learn, make sure you really understand why something is the way that it is, and
right,
build that habit, make that a habit, because that's going to make anybody better in their current role or any future roles. But it'll
right.
also help you kind of identify things you need to build or to learn to help get you to the next step.
Wow. So networking,
Yeah,
staying, I mean, be iterative in your approach and being curious. So wonderful.
that's it.
I mean, all of us are going to apply that for sure.
I hope
Thank you
so.
so much. It was wonderful to have you here. I know you're busy, and thank you for giving us the time you had. It was amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.